There you go. Thanks for coming. Alexis is here.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lucy. Hi, Alexis.
Hi.
So I guess we are waiting for other guests, and also David. I just text him. Also, just a reminder, I'm sure he knows. The British people, they're pretty much on the number.
He's Robert Sterling, huh?
Well, kind of like with everybody, Jim Sterling.
Oh, sorry, Jim Sterling, yes.
Yeah, even a, much more.
Yeah.
To me, at least, it's like,
Yeah.
one of the modern, gods.
Oh, yeah, right. That's when he said that, James Sterling. Oh, what?
Yeah, Bob Sterling, I don't know. He's kind of a, I take him seriously. I used to see him in New York taking the subway to downtown to Columbia where he was teaching.
Yeah.
Bob Sterling and all his condominiums and all that.
Yeah, that's right.
Scott is here.
Yeah. All right.
There is David. Hello, David. So, welcome back to Venice, David. Turn your mic on if you.
Thank you. Sorry, no, I've unmuted now, so finally you can hear me. Hi, Brian.
Yes. Hi. Welcome back to California. David was in Ohio. Was it Ohio, David?
Well, I'm actually not in California at the moment. I'm in Virginia, which is why
okay.
I got
That's where you are teaching.
my time wrong. So, but anyway, hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Let me introduce the students we have from from left to right. There are 4 students participating in this particular studio, David and Scott. Alexis knows has been at the midterm 2 weeks ago. It's the start 2 weeks, midterm 4 weeks. We are here now, and so it's a 4 weeks project. And it was headed by Gilbert Moore, Ariel Levy, Brian Call, Lucy Taylor, and they are teamed up. Each one of Ariel and Lucy made a team, and then Gilbert and Brian made a team, and each student developed their own projects, but in the same time, those 2 pairings combine their projects on the site they have chosen. So continue with the introductions. Alexis is here. He's the chairperson of East LA College Architecture Department, and Scott Callahan, one of our full-time professors. We have only 3: Alexis, myself, and Scott. And there is our guest, Maya Flores, another student. She wanted to see, she has not taken 201 yet, but next semester. So she wants to see the projects. And and then we have another guest student, Valeria Trujillo, another student that has ambitions on architecture. And the project is well, I should let David introduce himself first. I posted, your Google contacts and all that, so everybody looked up, and there are words. They are impressed with your TEDx presentation, and
Okay.
and I was very happy to finally meet you face to face. last week,
Mhm.
and our little walk around Venice and looking at architecture,
Yes.
and really enjoyed it. And could you briefly introduce yourself, David, if you don't
Well,
mind?
I can try.
Okay.
My name's David Turnbull, and I was trained as an architect a long, long time ago. In fact, I just had my 64th birthday, so that dates me. I've taught all over the place, notably most recently at the Cooper Union in New York for 15 years. And prior to that, at Yale and Columbia and Penn. So I've done the Northeast, and I taught at the Architectural Association in London before that for a decade. And in that time, I was working for an architect who you may have come across called James Sterling, whose practice, James Sterling, Michael Wilford and Associates, was very influential in the 1980s. And Jim died in 92, 93. And I came to Los Angeles for the first time with him to do a presentation for the Walt Disney Concert Hall in 1988, before everything got going. And we all knew that Frank Gehry would win, but we came anyway. And I went to Venice for the first time, to Rebecca's, which is no longer there, and wandered around the places that Orhan and I walked around a week ago. And it was very nice to meet him. It's very nice to meet you. I've been an educator for over 30 years in the field of design. And I write and draw and make exhibitions and occasional buildings, and also build schools in areas of the world where there is no access to water and very limited resources, building for $8 a square foot, which I decided was the most important thing to do at a certain time in my career, having been in Sterling's office and having built a model for a competition which cost the same as a Porsche. And I thought that was, frankly, outrageous. And I can now build a school with 4 classrooms, teaching spaces, teachers' rooms, and 150,000 litres of water storage capacity for the same price, which I figured is better value. At the Designs of the Year exhibition in London, one of the schools was exhibited alongside Frank Gehry's Louis Vuitton building in Paris. For the cost of that building, we could have built 50 schools on the African continent and completely changed the educational future of generations and generations of young people, instead of building a little building in a park for the richest people on the planet. So I'm hoping that that little anecdote makes it clear where I stand. And I'm very pleased to see you.
Thank you, David. We're quite impressive. We could just keep listening, and then do the projects, some other day too. And certainly, if you are around, plan to invite you more to.
Well, it'd be great to come in person rather than just on Zoom. I think that I've just started teaching in person again after 2 years, and it's a great pleasure to actually sit in the same space and talk to people, even with a mask on. And it makes a huge difference actually being able to kind of see the work.
Next time you come in, I'll make sure that you come into an environment like that, which we are starting in-person teaching next semester, starting Monday, David. And there are design studios face-to-face. I'll make sure if you are around town to invite you and have you engage with the development of the projects.
Well, I'm back on the 16th.
Okay.
So soon.
Okay.
12 days.
No, semester is long until June.
Yes.
So. great to have you. And I want to just briefly introduce to what, what inspired this particular class, and what is the project, and what are the things I thought we were exploring, and so you will see for yourself. It's students students, I like to address everybody with their name instead of grouping as students. Sorry, I apologize, guys. So they looked into 4-week sort of a charade like a project, and they looked into different architectural competitions, and they decided to go with this particular competition titled Museum of Emotions. And it's their second architectural project. I had them last semester in 201, which is the beginning architectural design studio class. And this winter, so we got together, this is our team, 5 of us, me being the instructor in the project Museum of Emotions. So what do you do in 4 weeks? So I kind of supported the idea about we look into sort of fictionality of image making in architecture. And at that point, I thought maybe it would be valuable to students to explore the area about architectural atmosphere, how you take something, even, without looking into storage room or functionality of things, and just to communicate a pure like fictionality of an idea, which is a very, very powerful tool of architecture. And so we looked into program. That was essential, one essential thing, which is as a museum. And we explored place, time, message, the qualities of architecture in the sense, and kind of let almost no requirements to unlimited experiment with an idea or imaginative or atmospheric architecture making, if you can call that. So yeah, and the students chose to deal with certain emotions they selected, and they will, it's like a part of inbuilt part of foundation of their projects. The interesting for me, the part of it was they selected a real site, and which is Los Angeles River. They selected a very strategic location of Los Angeles River where it forks. River goes through towards Long Beach and forks into Rio Honda arm tributary, a major tributary. And they selected this triangulated Y-shaped location of LA River. And interestingly enough, the project starts with all the way from underground of the riverbed and on it and above it. So it's, while the project was extremely based on imagination and storytelling and the fictional part of architecture, there was the reality of the site gave everybody an opportunity to respond to the city in different ways, and creating spectacular things and utilizing the riverbed itself, the concrete embankment that, usually it's the bad boy of every architectural idea. Everybody wants to break it apart and create a jungle and, different ecosystems and public parks and all that. So this group looked into the riverbed concrete and dealt with it as a possible place to put things on. So, and without going too much farther into, I can talk a lot about it, but the basic tenets of the project was really for them to explore these things that I headlined briefly about the architectural thinking that went behind it. And of course, we kind of could explore in depth only so much given the 4 weeks time, which kind of a time flies. And but in my opinion, the areas that I mentioned, the creating the fictionality of architecture, students accomplished quite a bit, and they had images in their mind, and they took those images all the way to the end, and then created this spectacular sort of constructions and buildings, sculptures, and stories around them. So without going too much further, we should start. I don't know, how did you guys decided that who should go first?
We didn't.
I thought you were a tight group. I take it back. Okay, why don't we start with Lucy and Ariel's projects?
Excuse me, Orhan, is Orhan,
Yeah.
is there a time limit or what's the time frame for today's presentation?
Well, we figured out, in our presentation, so the conversations and presentations can go up to half an hour. And
Okay.
since we have 2 presentations, half and half, 1 hour, since
Okay.
we already lost some of it,
Okay.
and they only go so far, and there are some overlapping discussions, I assume, in this. So we can go back and forth even towards the end.
Thank you.
Okay.
I made a little switch here. We usually go with Gilbert and Brian first, and this last minute surprise. Okay.
Okay, so the emotion that I chose was awe. Hold on, I wanted to make this full screen. And my project is titled Urban Awe. So to start the exploration, I thought about what does the word mean and what does it look like? And to me, the first thing I think of are views is awe-inspiring, particularly views of Los Angeles, and juxtaposing those views with like the built environment, I think intensifies that inspiring feeling. I also think that things that make you feel awe are very unexpected. And then shape-wise, like I was trying to think what form would awe take, and I think of something like exploding and uplifting and expanding, gravity defying, and then our site, LA River, is in a way a good contrast to that, because it's not thought of as being
Can you go to the next slide, Lucy?
it's not thought of as being a place of a nice view. So I was thinking, what would be unexpected in the LA River? These are just some of the inspiration that I had, thinking of the beauty of the river is the concrete. It reminds me of like brutalist architecture. I was inspired by Nancy Rubin's sculptures because they're industrial, like the ugly stuff that you don't think about, and she turns them into these gravity defying works of art. My love of Los Angeles was one of my main inspirations, and the official flower of Los Angeles is the bird of paradise. So I tried to incorporate that shape. Here's our site. So this is the LA River looking north. Downtown is off screen up in the upper left corner. So we've got, I placed my structure right up against the 710 freeway, because I was reading, Christopher Hawthorne was saying that the city of Los Angeles is most legible through motion, and you read it by moving through it. And this area in particular, being so industrial, it's like I drove around there, and it's hard to even find a place to stop. So you really are going to see this structure by driving mainly on the 710. So that's why I placed that there. And so I made it, you'll see, I've made a tower with viewing platforms to basically facilitate this experience of like the awe-inspiring view. So it's a viewing lookout tower that's in the LA River. So it's got 4 levels. It's 13 flights of stairs, but there's 4 levels. And these are the elevations. The 710 freeway is not on here, but it's about halfway up in height. So it's quite large. And I had these kind of tentacles extend down the river. So to try and just anchor itself into the concrete. And I used, material-wise, I kept it all concrete with two panels of glass. And when we pass this off to Ariel, you'll understand this a little bit more, but this is a section showing his and mine in the same location. This is just an exploded diagram to show that mess of pieces that I put together, like it actually isn't all that complicated. And then I'm just gonna quickly go through some renders. So I wanted it to be camouflaged in this concrete industrial infrastructure environment. There's a bike path just at the top of the river embankments, just below it. And some other views. So you'd access it from the base. So the main point for me was these like nighttime or sunset views and facilitating that. And then this is kind of my favorite shot because I think it takes the bird of paradise shape and makes it a little more evident. And then I have a video that's 2.5 minutes long. If I could play that, I'm just gonna share.
Are we gonna do the next one right away, or should we wait? I think they go in pairs, so Ariel should go on right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And at the end, we talk about both of them.
Okay,
Is that hollow to the right? Is that part of Ariel's?
yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So, okay, so there's
Yeah,
a
right
dialogue.
away.
There's a
good.
dialogue between the two.
Yes.
One sticks up and the other goes into the ground.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, here we go.
Go for it, Ariel.
Alrighty.
Take it from botanical.
I will. I will. Okay. Okay. Are you able to see?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I am here to talk to you about the Forsaken Realm. And naturally, from the name itself, the emotion that I was inspired by with this design is the emotion Forsaken. And in terms of, I think this one.
Ariel, I'm so sorry. Can
Yeah.
you move that band that says stop share and your screen sharing thing up outside
can
of
see
the
that?
image?
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know you could see that.
Yeah, now it's better.
Here, I think I can get it to go away completely. One sec.
I mean, moving to the side works.
Okay.
Yeah, this is even better.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going off of the emotion Forsaken, and I think even though you can point at a dictionary and say this word means this, I think this can encompass so many different ideas. And so when it came to what I viewed and perceived this emotion as, there were so many different thoughts that were running around in my head, but these are like the general ones that I took all the way from the beginning of the conceptualization to now, which are like abandoned or deserted of either human life, of familiar life, or either all life. The sensation of waking up in an unknown environment that's sort of foreign or maybe even mysterious, but also this lure of danger, but yet you still want to seek more and to explore a sort of maybe out of body or alternate reality, maybe even dreamlike. And so given that these were just ideas that I was throwing around in my head, these were just some idea drawings that I came up with. So scapes of lines and maybe like a harshness on the interior that's encompassed by like in a sort of appealing exterior. And then also dealing with our, exploiting our discomfort with our own bodies, or the discomfort that we have with the ways in which other things can be if we enlarge them or magnify them, or even stick them onto our own bodies, or remove features, like in this case here, like removing any features of eyes whatsoever. And so where this led me is I started off with thinking about, I know I wanted to break the experience somehow in terms of the way we know reality to normally be it. And I chose to deal with this in terms of lighting. So the thing that I came up with is I recalled from like years ago in high school, sodium vapor lights and the ways in which they emit monochromatic lighting. So these lights, even if you held and again, this is under a completely isolated situation where it's only this one light source. So these sodium vapor lights, under their lighting, all of the objects appear only as one wavelength. So even if you had blue or red in there, they would look the same in terms of their saturation. So they might be darker or lighter, but they would appear as the same hue. And that was the lighting that I chose. And what I decided is this is a very internal experience embedded into the LA River itself. So I was thinking these could be attached to Lucy's structure and almost, retrieve them from hers. And then there's this, mission to go explore the Forsaken Realm. And so I ended up with this tubular sort of almost like a lightsaber design. And the next thing I incorporated in terms of the environment inside of the Forsaken Realm is I dealt a lot with vibrations and the sensations, the energy that they can create throughout these tunnels. as you're experiencing them, and they roll over your body. And I'll show you this in a second. There's an animation I have as well, which if you have headphones, I recommend you use them soon, since you can really feel the vibrations with the animation. And so it would be these vibrations that sort of emanate through and out the tunnel to really give it more of a sense that this is like a being, or like a parasite, which I'll get into in a second. So it's like breathing or maybe swallowing, and it's this sort of rush of vibrations that ripple out. You feel them in the distance, and they come and come, and they rush over your body and pass, and they keep going back and forth. And so then the third thing is going with the exploitation of bodies. So I wanted to create an experience that feels sort of hostile to, really encapsulate the user and feel like, for what I was talking about, making this a forsaken, unreal, otherworldly space. But then also I chose to make it hostile, since this is like a very conceptually negative counterpart to Lucy's positive experience. So what I ended up with, I was originally choosing crystals, but then as soon as I decided to put it underground, that seemed very much like I'm making a cave. So I exploited the human body some more, and I ended up with teeth, these grotesque yellow, sort of blackened, rotting teeth. And all three of these features come together throughout the tunnel to make this sort of experience here, where you're in this this dark void of these, the teeth are situated on these Vanta black walls. So it creates this infinity void where there's no texture. It's just complete empty blackness, and then just you alone with the teeth and your light. And so they all come together in this experience where you're exploring this realm with this sodium lightsaber, with these vibrations that go throughout the tunnel, and these teeth attacking you. And just intermittently throughout the system, you find artwork laid out like it's been swallowed up. And in terms of the interaction with the surface level, there has to be some way to get down into these underground depths. So I ended up with 3 rifts, as I'm calling them, which are the mouths that open to these tunnels. And this is where I pulled a lot of inspiration from the river itself. So there's 3 rifts, and they're all based off of 3 factors in how the Ellie River has failed, because it's really this empty concrete channel that supposedly before I was born was like this really booming place where people would go fish and kayaking, and it was pretty exciting. So the first rift that I ended up with is the drought rift, and this is like the most general because this kind of applies to all of California, but nonetheless it's a big reason as for why the river itself is just always so barren. There's literally no water. Except for this little small middle channel. So I ended up with this idea of like these tentacles that are reaching out to drink the water from that skinny little middle channel, which we'll look at in a second. And the second one was this urban rift. So the way
Can you zero
which,
in on those riffs a little bit more?
the renders
Yeah.
or the okay. So then I ended up with the urban rift here, which is this collection of juxtaposed wireframe cubes and they all share this sort of same language where they're distorted, more organic. They're not like straight lines. They're wavy and they're organic. And so this, sorry, the computer is being a little weird. Okay. And so this urban rift is these, like I was saying, there are these wireframe blocks that are juxtaposed, and they're sort of like an indication of the copy and paste architecture, or like the blockiness of LA, and to go with the way in which many people have just turned their back to the river itself, up until recently, of course, but largely so. The river has just sort of been abandoned. And then the third thing is really the cleanliness of the river. And so maybe this can go into the organisms of like what's in there, but I chose to focus more on the trash aspect of it. And so I ended up with this extrapolation of like a mound of garbage that's then turned into, it almost looks like this mountainous chunk, these trash piles, but then you have all these like intricate lines of reflections that come off of all the junk pieces that are just scattered throughout it, and it ends up being like this web of a mountainous chunk that becomes the third rift, which is the trash rift. And so these are the 3 ways that you get into the Forsaken tunnels. And in terms of the experience inside them, and I'm going to jump here for a second and go back. So these are where the 3 rifts are located. Up here is the urban rift, which is the rectangular juxtapositions. And then in the middle here, you have the the drought rift, which with its tendrils that reach out for the water, and then the trash rift down here, which is the extrapolation of the garbage pile. And so what happens here is, you have this mess of underground tunnels, which are laid out in like the formation of a parasite, really just like a jungle mess of overlapping lines in itself that come together in these various ways. So the urban rift, with its idea of turning its back on the river, is located in the most isolated region of our site, which is past the 710 Long Beach freeway here. There's this sort of division that's created in the river with this freeway, and so that rift is placed there as it's more isolated away, and consequently the tunnels themselves are much less exciting. It's very linear and very drawn out. Then with the drought rift, with it being like this major growth onto the surface and reaching out for the water, this region ties into the core heart region, as I call it, as this is right underneath where Lucy's structure is placed. So this is like, it's feeding off of her structure, and as a result, it's the largest and most complex region with all these overlapping tunnels that bend out and in, and there's just a lot more going on there in terms of how many tunnels there are. And then going with the trash rift, since it's such a general problem and there's so many different things that encompass it in the river, because there's so many different types of trash, or in the sense of, could also talk about bacteria and other things that are in the river. This is like the general region, and it's this in between of the isolated and the core heart, where it's like a mix of overlapping tunnels and sorry, let me get my charger, my laptop's gonna die. And this mix of looping tunnels and complexity from both, but just a mix and blends in between. And so with these different regions, one rift is placed in each region, and so consequently the tunnels in each respective region are catered to be based off of the rifts themselves. So I'm going to zoom into this drawing here. In the general region, since it's based off of trash in terms of the rift, this one is kind of a very linear translation, where there would be trash littered throughout the tunnel. And for the isolated region, it would be these concrete and rebar that have been sort of swallowed up as well, like it's been pulled directly from the river, since it's an urban feature of mass concrete being used in our buildings and architecture. And then the core heart region is a little more special. It's the one in the middle. It really pulls them together, and it's sort of the most exciting. So in here, we break that idea of the Vanta black void a little bit, where you now have these bleeding cracks, since since the rift is reaching out for water, it's almost like it's dehydrated, and now it's just starting to bleed from that lack of water, and it breaks the void a little, because now you have these lines in the tunnel walls where you can actually have defining features that you light up with your sodium lamp. And then as well in the air, there are these particles that float, like it's skin breaking off and just floating in the air. So we went through that, and this is a sort of similar section to Lucy. I think it's a really good showcase for the awe of her structure with how big it is, and then also the way in mine it sort of leashes into the river, into the world, for users to break into. And just showing the relationship between hers and mine again, they sort of speak to each other. At least this is the drought rift here positioned next to hers. And again, you can see how mountainous and tall hers is, and the way you can see hers throughout mine, and it looks back to it. And I'm gonna go into an animation right now to showcase the vibrations and the experience of hers and mine. So if you have headphones, I recommend you put them on. And that concludes my part of the presentation. So.
Great. Okay, what do we do now?
We comment on what we
Talk
saw
about
and what we thought about the image making and the story and its architectural ramifications and how they kind of found their way of expression and how they used it to explain architectural ideas. And so I personally, I mean, I'm starting already, saw this wonderful liberation on each project, that discovery of the way that you can tell stories with architectural image making and the technology and digital uses and the tools, and it was very clear that how it elated to each designer and finding a way I can finally do things, I can finally, like express it. And yeah, we discussed it during, as you guys know, that it wasn't really technically putting stairs and bathrooms together, but the ideas of them. Okay, this is how you get there. This doesn't have to have a structure kind of a thing, but I mean, it's just the idea of it, and it can be developed. So I saw that kind of liberation on each project that had its basis on certain ideas as they awe and forsaken realities. And for me, it was very, is today to, great to see that the way of expression was found, adopted, and explored by each student. The spaces were really kind of a story spaces. They are not, like this is not your museum, this is not your tunnel, this is the story, and so, maybe it's a good place to start, to looking from that angle and go further that way. I mean, that's how, what the presentation inspired in me to talk it this way.
Well, shall I jump in? Is that all right? So Lucy, I thought it was a beautiful presentation, wonderful structure, and I really appreciate the juxtaposition of the bird of paradise with the river, or the non-river river. I think that the most powerful images for me were at the end, when you had to include, when you included Ariel's project in your renderings. Because I think the relationship between, for both of you, the relationship between this kind of uncanny, strange, peculiar, contorted, and at times exquisite, other times horrifying bird of paradise, with the awful void of the forsaken realm, the hollows of the imagination, the caves and the underworld. That there's a story which is told between the two, which is incredibly interesting, between, in a sense, very directly between heaven and hell, and of LA as a condensation of both. And I was struck by the thought that came to mind for me, which is, I don't know, maybe it's just because of what I'm reading at the moment, but Ed Soja, in his book Postmodern Geographies, writing about Los Angeles, described it as the Aleph, a kind of concentration of energy and of simultaneities, of everything at once, and at the same time, nothing at all. And I thought what was most powerful about the two projects together was that sense of superabundance and complete absence in the same presentation. I The only issue that I would have, are you submitting this for a competition?
Yeah, I think we are, but it doesn't.
Well, you took the brief anyway, but let's say whether you are or not, I'm not sure, and probably the videos don't go in for the competition anyway. But I think that there's a video opportunity here for you to, if you could, to collaborate on sort of exploring what it is to be inside the hollows of Ariel's project, looking out and up and through, and in a way, there are the two things. I've never understood quite how people choose the music for their soundtracks, and I think that there's something to do with the atmosphere here that that actually could work with a different way of thinking about the sound and what these places sound like. And Lucy, I would wager that your place does not sound like your soundtrack at all. If anything, it sounds like a strange mixture, in fact, both of you, a strange mixture in my mind between Einstürzen und Neubauten from Berlin in their absolutely worst, darkest period of pieces of metal being bashed together and producing incredible noise, which at the same time is animated by Blixer Bargeld's screaming. And then something incredibly heavenly. I imagine somehow Einstürzen und Neubauten, Blixer Bargeld, and Hildegard von Bingen doing medieval plainsong or something like that within the petals of the bird of paradise. And then in the hollows of Ariel's project, I had wolves in the throne room or some kind of very, very dark and savagely eco-tragic kind of soundtrack, which was at the same time oddly redemptive. And I don't know whether all hands read this, but there's a beautiful review of a Wolves in the Throne Room album. It's called At the Edge of the Smoking Pool of Death. And Ariel, I saw your project as being the smoking pool of death, except that the smoking pool of death isn't as deadly as it appears to be. It's also the place of redemption and hope. And I mean, I think that's that for me, that would be the message, is how do you put the two forms together, the hollows and mysterious, uncanny depths of Ariel's project, bleeding, the skin breaking forth, erupting, with Lucy's strangely industrial birds of paradise, which are also occasionally more like Chihuly glass sculptures erupting through what otherwise would be heavy metal sculpture. So you've got something like a kind of joie de vivre that you get from colliding those two modalities together. And I think that you've both got that. It's just a matter of finding a way of making one or two images that encapsulate the qualities of the two together, which I think together they're better than apart, and more profound together than they are apart, although each of them has very, very specific and very strong qualities individually. It's the conversation that's the most important thing from my point of view. Does that make sense?
That's a beautiful review.
Yes, thank you.
And I fully agree with David that, you know, the two projects are, you know, you guys develop to the level, they're like inseparable in a way. They just make a better story together. Better sort of brings everything that it was mentioned, the left, right, up, down, cold, hot, you know, scary, you know, funny, all that stuff together more seamlessly. And because they're you know, the spatial relationship between the two is like a perfect setup for the story, you know, where one elates you to, you know, you just kind of breathe out and breathe in, you know, this like the LA certain quality, clean, open space, and the other one is immediately brings yet another LA reality, which is, you know, more sinister qualities of the city that, you know, we see every once in a while.
Yes, but can I, just so that it's not so sinister, and I don't want to leave you from my side anyway with the feeling that I read it as dark poetry. I think that it's. I saw something else which I think it occupies the problems that we all confront at the moment to do with the future of the planet and the future of the city and the impact of climate change. That the LA River animates in itself without any help, but what you do, both of you, one of you by digging in and the other by planting something on it, is to make a place out of something which is purposely to do with directing flows. You actually put in something that interrupts that, that makes a place of contemplation. And I think there's something very hopeful about that. And I just wanted one little anecdote, which is that during the period of Occupy Wall Street in New York City, I was teaching at the Cooper Union, and the Cooper Union itself was occupied. But downtown, there was a Zuccotti Park, which was the headquarters of Occupy, was organized socially around a sculpture by Mark de Suvero, who also has a piece in Venice on the ocean by the boardwalk, and it was called Joie de Vivre, which is a copy. It's the same as the one in Venice. It's the same in New York, same in another place. It was reinstalled as part of the Whitney Annual and decorated with collaborative works, and so it was used as a parliament where the twisted form of steel became identified with the Parliament of Occupy. And I think what you've made, just to think about it a little bit, is between you, is to make a kind of a parliamentary assembly, a place of assembly for people and humans and non-humans to meet, to imagine a future. And I think that's the kind of the redemptive story that goes with the combination of awe and awesomeness and forsakenness, that in the middle there is this opportunity to contemplate that we are not forsaken as a species, at least not yet, and that there is some hope, and that this is a place to think about it.
I could bring the conversation with the sinister all the way there. You know, I do look at the sinister aspect of LA is a beautiful thing. You know, it's just like the between, and then finally you brought out very well at the end that they combined and created this public realm of the agora of the city. You know, underground, overground, and where they meet. Great review, guys. You know, I'm sure that you're gonna be listening this over and over. How about you, Alexis? Do you have any comments?
Thank you. Well, as I was on the sort of mid-project review, I had a chance to see this, and now this level of development. As I was listening to David's comments, you know, I must say I really don't want to maybe add more to it, to take away sort of the focus of this conversation that you've had with the students, David. But you know, I've been in Los Angeles most of my life, and there's such a nuanced qualities of cultures and levels and strata throughout Los Angeles. The area that the site is located is very industrial, and we really don't have any kind of, there's nothing there to go to see or to do as other places of Los Angeles, which I find very interesting in terms of these two projects that are so magnificent in terms of scale and visibility and experience. And yet I think it is Los Angeles, you know, in that sense. There is a sort of vast sort of emptiness in that area that exists, and when you, until you go there yourself, you really can't experience it and see the vastness of this emptiness of space, and sort of there's nothing there to attract you unless you live there, you know, which I find is very interesting in that sense. I mean, we have these, you know, these pylons, these columns of light that welcome you to LAX that you can see from everywhere. And I was looking at Lucy's structure and thinking, you know, that would be quite a magnificent visible object in the panorama, and welcomes you or brings you or does something. But, you know, I think that kind of place that it has in Los Angeles, I think, well, what is its position or its place or its purpose, or what is the message behind it? Now I'm just throwing a question here, not necessarily to be answered, but and yet we know people live there. There is a whole culture. There's families that have been living there for generations in that area. Right? So I find that very interesting in those aspects. But I also find it very interesting in the sense of the whole project itself, that this was a student idea to start this project, to do a project together in the middle of the semesters without any structure of a semester or syllabus or a project assignment from the instructor, you know. And I find that very interesting because this is completely student-led. And sometimes when we step aside and let the students kind of do their thing, magical things can happen. And I find that very, very special, actually. I'm really pleased to see that, that you guys have this synergy amongst you, and have taken time just to do this because you want to be involved in doing more work and develop ideas. And fortunately, Orhan has backed you guys up on this, and I find this very, very, very exciting. So that's all I want to say.
I'll just say a couple quick things. Earlier this morning, I was modeling a 12 by 12 by ½ inch thick steel plate for our Conduct 4 class that I'm teaching in the fall. So it's one of the nice things about architecture is the range and the scope of you know, where you can go on a daily basis, right? From the most detailed mundane thing to the most kind of extraordinary or unexpected things. So it seems like a nice project and a fun thing to do over a winter semester. Ariel, I was wondering if you've seen that documentary that's about the rescue of the kids in Thailand that got stuck in the cave.
No, I've never seen that.
I just saw it recently. It's pretty wild, you know. I mean, I followed it from afar here when it was happening, not really paying much attention, but the documentary goes into the details of these cave divers and how there's only a few of them in the world with basically their own custom rigs of scuba equipment, and how they go through these tunnels and miles in and finally come up with a plan for how they're going to rescue these Thai kids that were on a soccer team that I guess not really foolishly, because they go exploring all the time, but somehow there was this torrential rain and they got trapped deep inside the cave, and the middle section got all flooded out. It's really amazing. So, I mean, I was thinking of that, and then I was also thinking about because unfortunately, I've been watching this Boba Fett show, which is terrible, but have to watch it anyway because it's Star Wars. And so Boba Fett is emerging out of this like sunken sand beast thing where the throat of it is all these like spikes and stuff, and he manages to escape. So I think, between those two projects, I think you probably have seen them both. You're just not telling us.
No, I promise I haven't. I really don't like Star Wars.
Oh, no.
So,
There you go.
but your work clearly is in that realm of storytelling, right? I mean, even your more, I guess, real projects, in a regular semester. So those are really important skills to have, and I think it's a lot of fun. Lucy, specifically yours, one thing I thought was really interesting was how flat the top of it was. And I don't think that's bad at all. I mean, there's so much exuberance in it on its own, but I just thought that I was trying to figure out if you consciously were resisting making the top really flat, or if there was a reason behind that.
You mean just the level of the top platform, or?
No, the majority of the pieces, the individual pieces, at the top, it wasn't like one was this high and one was this high and one was whatever. They were all fairly even, and I was just curious about that. I know it's a really detailed thing, but I think it's still successful and shows some restraint. And I was really wanting to point that out to the other students. And I think also, Lucy, the interesting thing about yours is, and in comparison with Ariel's, is when, at least for me, when I look at Ariel's, I go, oh, this is just a crazy thing, right? This is just a crazy fun thing. And clearly no one's ever going to build these weird tunnels, right? So in some ways it's easier to swallow, or more ready for someone to accept it. When I look at yours, I'm like, well, but maybe that could be real. But nobody's going to build that. And well, would anyone go there if it was real? So I'm not saying which is a more clever approach. I think, the extreme of Ariel's much more unrealistic. It sets everyone up for that suspension of disbelief, which comes with movies and things like that. And then yours kind of straddles that middle zone where I'm like, oh, but maybe no, we're not going to build that. And it's an interesting response for what you guys do to the viewer, I think, to put them in those shoes, to think about it in terms of how real it is or isn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you learn things from it, like constructing a story, following it up, and tap into its possibilities. What it means to design a space, and how it, start from inside outside, how it can expand, how the connections come through, both literally or structurally, architecturally. You explored ideas that is applicable to your future projects, which is, you'll find it useful. Okay, let's go to the next pair.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Welcome. I am Brian Cole, and my design partner is Gilbert Seymour. We worked very closely together to create what we call Gemosium, a museum of emotion. Our museum of emotions embodies two emotions, one positive and one negative, in the hopes to span the vast range of responses rightfully evoked when viewing or exploring the rich and complex history of the Los Angeles River.
So greetings. I'll introduce you to the two emotions we've chosen. So for the positive emotion, we chose the emotion of giddiness, or one feeling giddy, because this really captured this idea of excitement or happiness that is so overwhelming it causes the person experiencing it to sort of feel dizzy. Giddiness sort of found form and shape in our structure as this unit that will be repeated throughout the entire museum. You'll see that in a bit. And then for our negative emotion, we chose nostalgia, which is like sort of the act of remembering, but more intrinsically negative because the fact that you're remembering an aspect or idea, concept in your life that no longer is present. So it kind of straddles this line of being homesick. Nostalgia would take the shape of our central structure in our overall museum that you'll see as we get into it. As we showed, okay, just for a bit quickly, prefacing it, we inherently shows emotions that are almost complicated in their way that they're non-explicitly positive or negative as a sort of way to blend them better into each other and sort of allow the patron or guest to create their own experience. So without like forcing too much emotion on them. But here's our design development for Giddy, which Brian Cole.
Yes, for my design development, I really wanted to focus on majority of the positive sides of what Giddy stood for, the dizziness, excitement, being overexcited, playful, fun, happy, colorful, things that really brought that out, of just being just so, like a little kid at Christmas, opening his gifts. They're just so overexcited. They don't know what to do with themselves. And I started thinking about it and I thought, what is more, first of all, we're a child, bubbles is always really fun. When you're a kid, you have such a great time with bubbles. That led me to these formations that I found of these methane bubbles that are frozen in ice. As they freeze, they stack. And it kind of became a very interesting philosophy to me in that respect. I also felt that I wanted to really incorporate the ideology of the kaleidoscope, the way colors and images are all, they kind of flow together through motion in a circular fashion. And here you see I chose several different patterns that really express that. I felt that these were bright and vibrant thought processes to bring forward. So I started out with some sketches, as we all try to do, thinking of different shapes and how people show that they're giddy, how they show they're excited. And through that process, I determined the space that I really wanted to focus on was the actual experience within the person themselves. And I chose the very central form of a round shape. Starting with a circle, you can't stack circles really to give them something that you wanted to do. So I began making these torus bubble shapes that were of different sections of light, of color and pattern. They would then be stacked together and to create what we want to allow light to penetrate and refract from within. So then they would move to this series of bubbles that would be stacked on top of this construct that we created. We started with the common post support leg that you see in all the freeway underpasses or whatnot. It didn't play well to itself. We felt that there could be something more to the shape. So I moved to a more of a counterbalanced, counterlevered shape that allows it to support the main ring, which is actually part of the actual support. So you have a stone up until the point where we then begin installing the glass rings themselves. Here we see the 4 different patterns that I was able to manifest, giving ourselves a true idea of what it would be like to be inside the towers and to literally just stand there and just turn around in a circle like a kid with their hands up, just turning around and becoming dizzy. Here is one of the main towers that I feel was one of the best renderings we had, with someone inside experiencing that idea in that purple realm. The light coming in, the light and the different rings catching the sun, giving us the different glare spots. I felt this was a really good rendition and a visual of what that could feel like.
So as we get into the design development for the nostalgia portion of our structure, we see I started here. It's a complete collection of like sort of my sketchbook ramblings and how I kind of came up with the overall shape, form, and experience of it. So this all started with using dictionary definitions of the term nostalgia but then deciding to move away from that because I started viewing nostalgia as more of a personal sort of emotion. It's one that really you can't attribute to a dictionary definition because it's really different for different people. It's based on their sort of lived experience and how they remember it and how they recall it. So in that, I moved away from definitions and started to frame my design, like hinging it on nostalgia's portrayal in art, psychology, and all sort of sciences like that. So what I was using was more along the lines of ink blots. I started focusing towards the idea of how psychologists use ink blots in Rorschach test and how that has more of a personal effect on somebody where they become inherently nostalgic about an experience when they themselves project their own personal memories onto something that honestly would be formless, shapeless, and not have its own history. So I use that, I use paintings, other sort of things, and sort of arrived at these original initial shapes that I try to frame nostalgia as both this formless thing, something that's a little bit symmetrical, something that strips the mainly nostalgia negative portion of nostalgia was the fact that something's lost, the fact that even though you're remembering what might be even a good memory, it's not present in your life currently. So that's why there's had to be this portion of it that was out of reach to the viewer, as well as a massive scale, like this overall size, that would shrink the person experiencing it, the patron, because just naturally they were smaller technically at the time they would be nostalgic about because they were younger leading up to, even if it was just a memory from not too long ago. So just, this was the overall original design concepts as it moved along to the next phase of development. So here I tossed together what I just, it's a lookbook, sort of things that inspired both its material composition as well as further design concepts. So I started looking into highly reflective materials because both that creates this concept of reflection. It creates an optical illusion where you're moving both forward as well as reflecting on your past. As someone who's feeling nostalgia, they're here in the present and they're moving forward in time, but they're, conceptually thinking about a former date and how they themselves want to be living in that previous era. So as well as blue marble, which sort of took the more structured form material, because this would recall sort of the LA River's history. I wanted to create this sort of aquatic nature, which sort of married itself with the giddy concept of bubbles, because there's this aspect of sort of free flowing water and freezing that in time as a memory itself is a snapshot of one specific thing that should be fluid and mobile. On the right side, we see both, I took inspiration from framed photography, how photography itself, once again, it frames, it captures a memory in one single space, even though that thing is naturally moving. Salvador Dali's Persistence of Memory, which itself comments on the aspect of, it sort of both compares a memory to a melting object, how over time, and the further you get away from it, it's morphing to something more unrecognizable. So I wanted that aspect of your memories not exactly being the way they are, but sort of being hazier or more different than how they originally occurred. And once again, the use of ink blots, which really gave the structure its overall form. So yeah, I use opaque, different sort of frosted glasses as well. So this was sort of the final design that I ended up arriving at. It was much more angular than those original ones, which was intentional because I sort of extrapolated those 6 traditional walls of a usual, typically closed space, and sort of viewing them as frames of the outwards, like the outside world, and vessels for which people, light, and air could be passing through it. We have the rising frames. So it's those sort of 3 circular frames that rise in optics. They're of different opacity levels. So the further they get away from you, the image that you see through them is sort of hazier or harder to see through, as one has with a memory that's not closer to them. So the overall scale, once again, towers over the person, reflective. Certain edges of the building would be reflective, allowing the river itself to sort of pass through. We created, so there are several hub areas that we wanted to have in our structure, both me and Brian, when we put them together. These hub areas would allow if someone were experiencing the structure, since portions of it were positive and portions of it negative, I wanted to allow the patron to have the choice, the free choice of staying within one for any given amount of time, because just to sort of validate that aspect of them allowing to feel how they want to feel at a certain given time. So if they wanted to stay in the negative aspect longer, they could stay here. So what we decided to create were unique share-alike structures. This one was extrapolated from the Brian's giddiness design and sort of created to be a small scale version of giddiness, and it would be placed throughout the hub area on the negative emotion design of nostalgia to sort of illustrate how there are even moments of giddiness that occur throughout experiencing nostalgic memories and remembrance. So on the right side, you could just see sort of alternate views of the render we created. We move on. And then this for the last portion of just my nostalgic page, I wanted to create these literal snapshots and photographs of like vignettes along the path as you walk across it, and sort of show and illustrate how these forms, these oversized, large frame-like openings that I wanted to create along my structure, really both from any viewpoint along the path, frame the environment and frame the LA River, how you sort of see, like, sort of like as if you were taking photos of the LA River and you create this memory about this era like that you're nostalgic about. So yeah, it really found unique shapes. As light passes through the blue marble, it creates this almost seafloor bed on the ground, which once again recalls an era in which the LA River would actually have been populated with water. So yeah, as we move along to the next. So for these final few slides, we wanted to actually show how the structures sort of like intertwined and became integrated with each other. Gymnasium, which is a sort of portmanteau of emotions museum and mine and Brian's first initials. On the right side, we see this is the north elevation, where I really tried to illustrate how you can see the light, how light reacting with the highly reflective material creates this image where the river is still continuing, but then also reflecting on its past.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah, Brian, can you zoom in? We're sharing from Brian's screen. There we go. Oh, previous page. Zoom in on the page to the right.
Yeah, zoom in on the image.
Brian, you got it? You could zoom in and then drag. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So here, it sort of created this relationship between the two, where you could see Brian's structures, the structures of giddiness. I wanted to start viewing giddiness as isolated bursts along a given path, as sort of this experience that really fluctuates and grows as you approach or arrive at a space. And also there were individual portions in which you could enter each one. They're color coded differently. So sort of there's warm and cold colors depending on which emotion you want to attribute to your giddiness. You could enter that selected one or choose to move along the path because there is a guided bridge. And if you did follow the guided bridge, there would be a different experience if you were moving from east to west as opposed to west to east, because there are, so from this view, which would actually, since we're from the north, it would be east to west, the individually colored structures would arrive towards, once passing through nostalgia, would arrive towards a multicolored structure that's more kaleidoscopic in nature. And if you went the opposite direction, they sort of disseminate into individual colors, which we just, once again, that ties into the non-linearity aspect we were going for, how the emotional mobility of different patrons or guests would be different based on their own personal experience, and they would like want to have different experiences going along the path. So Brian, you can move along.
So here we have 3 pieces of different views. First, starting from the looking to the east from the west side of the towers, we see their independence. We also see the different levels and heights, offering a different set of experiences, as well as the footbridge that runs above the lower level plaza area. The bridge itself is a mimicry of the path pattern itself. To kind of
Where's
also
the bridge? Yeah, can you zero in on the bridge?
Yeah.
Guys, you know, when you're talking about certain things, you know, don't let us look in 1-inch drawings, just show them, go inside, you know, take us there, you know.
So here you see the footbridge running around the purple tower. It connects with the blue tower and allows access, and it accesses the purple one. The other 2 are very visuals from the footbridge above. The red, purple, and blue are all accessible from the ground level. Let's go back. Okay, so then here we see, this is just kind of a bit of a painted rendering of the interior inside of the Nostalgia Pavilion itself. Again, the middle ground between the tower assemblies, a space where people can gather, talk about their experiences, and review the river as you can from through the blue glass and experiencing the blue marble ceilings. And then here is a view from the east side looking west at the multicolored tower, giving us an idea of how the middle structure integrates with the central confluence triangle shape, as we also occupy both sides of the LA River and the Rio Hondo, joining them together, thus joining the two neighborhoods that are separated by a lot of streets and kind of a difficult path to get to one side from the other. We created a little bit of a microcosm of ability for circulation above and below to allow people to be able to access the riverbed and enjoy its the vast space that it gives them to do what they want to do. So here we brought this, I created this image because it felt really powerful to me. The storm is clearing and the sun is shining and we see Gymnasium. You can see it from the Imperial crossover and you'd be able to see it from the 710. So it's viewable from both of the main tributaries that allow traffic to flow through this neighborhood. As I mentioned before, it also ties the two neighborhoods on the side, one being more of a commercial environment, the other being a very residential area. But it does join these areas very uniquely in the sense that it crosses over and on top of the river itself.
And also just a few more things that you could visually see through these selected vignettes are the fact that if you were moving along this, we really wanted to create this sense of belittlement by the time you arrive to the nostalgic portion, because that is, once again, the portion in which you're remembering a time in which you were younger. So we had these towers of giddiness sort of represent that sort of excitement you have as you're approaching or were about to remember an experience you were probably rather positive about. So you're guided by that giddiness and excitement, but by the time you arrive there, you are sort of shrunken by the size increasing of each tower or obelisk. So that's also just portrayed through these images of just the exact, that give you really a sense of like the towering scale some of these individual structures have over you if you were just residing underneath or along it. So yeah. And then we should have one more, yeah, a few more pages. So this one would be the site plan, just to sort of see where we decided to place the overall structure along the rivers. This was kind of important for us because we wanted to make sure the river would pass along our structures, because for mine at least, for the idea of nostalgia, we wanted this, the river to be able to pass through it, but then the form and design of it, the building itself, which once again takes that concept of blue marble and freezing something that should be free flowing in one space or time, takes almost the water from the river that would have existed nostalgically or in the history of the river and freeze it isolated in one spot along it. And that sort of found its shape all along Brian's structure. I think, Brian, you could speak towards where the placements were important towards yours. And on the right, we can see the section just to sort of see the interiors and overall build.
Yeah, the site plan reflects a little bit of how things were placed in relationship and respect to the river itself, allowing for the river to do what it was initially intended to do when it was created, to let the water flow, but also puts some of our elements at a level that would interact with the river if it did refill at some point, as well as elements that would remain above the river that could be viewpoints for opportunities to actually enjoy the river as a visual with the water in and of itself on both sides. And again, retapping the issue of reconnecting bike paths that you really can't get to very easily. You know, people be able to come down if they're riding from one direction or another, and they can stop and relax in the middle of the river and be able to converse and then continue on with their journey. And here we have a couple of sections that we put together. The top one being more of an idea of how the tower would look in the way of a section. And then the bottom one has more of a section cut that focuses on the nostalgia structure on the center island of the confluence. And here that brings us to this point of just a very clean look, looking north, seeing the clouds coming in and having the people interacting with the space and moving about at this point in time. This would conclude our presentation of Gymnasium.
Thank you.
Can you go back to the image? Let's leave it on an image that we can look at it, pick one up.
Could you go back to? Yeah, I like this one a lot. I'm really curious about it. There are two things that came to mind, well, lots of things that came to mind for me while I was listening to you. And Brian, well, first of all, the whole issue about positive and negative, I'm not sure I believe in it. For me, nostalgia is hugely enjoyable in a way that a giddiness is something that I've been trying to let go of. And I'm interested by what you get, and I think there's something in the conversation that, first of all, the entire assemblage that you've both made is a bridge, right, across the river, and that it is, in a sense, as you say at the end, and I wonder whether this is really part of the initial provocation, is that it imagines a future in which the river may be full of water. And I think that's very, very important. For me, this is, the project is a kind of love song about the river, but about the river as some people, the Friends of the LA River as an organization, are in love with the concrete work, and publish and do exhibitions and publish photographs online about the beauty of the concrete. And yet on the other side of the coin, as Orhan said in his initial provocation, there are many people in Los Angeles who would like to drill holes in the bottom and soften up the base and all of that sort of thing and make it absorbent. And there must be at least one or two people like me who'd like to put dams in it, and so that when there is a lot of rain, it stays in the river. And I believe that maybe you, Brian and Gilbert, you're in that category, which is where if the river could be full of water, and if that water, the runoff from the whole of the city of Los Angeles, did not end up in the Pacific Ocean, but instead stayed in the city, what would that mean? And so what would you get? And what you would get in your case is an amazing kind of candy-colored evocation of Watts, or of the Orange Show in Houston, a kind of outsider art installation of extraordinary places which are rendered according to the logic of dreams as a set of cosmic stupas, temples that connect heaven to the water. That if the LA River was again full of water, would be reflected in it. And so, Brian, in a sense, your mission would be to make a rendering, not so much the one that you've got, which I think is very beautiful, of the person looking up inside these cosmic emblems, these temple structures, the glass stupas, the polished marble, into a kind of ecstatic state. But also of those things reflected in the now full LA River.
Okay.
And that the story of redemption that you tell, which is, as I say, it's a love story. Is one where the bubbles, the accumulation of bubbles that become of different sizes, the bubble, you talked about it, the sphere becoming a torus, and the torus form being stacked in order to become this ancient a Buddhist or Hindu symbol that is directly a model of the axis mundi, the axis of the earth, going from heaven to into the core of the earth, a spiritual place, that each of these in their different colors, invoking different moods, are a place of contemplation over the river, reflected in the river, And I think that for me, that relates very directly also. I think the entire project is not about either giddiness or nostalgia, but is actually a kind of poem about homesickness, where the homesickness is a yearning for a form of Los Angeles that never existed, but could. And in this, I see the visionary architecture of somebody like Paolo Soleri and his arcologies built in the Sonoran Desert in Arco Santi, or imagined. And it's interesting to me that Soleri, S-O-L-E-R-I, many of his projects, none of them built except one, which is not his least successful project, but they were bridges. And a bridge is a very important place, metaphorically and literally, a means for getting from one side of the river to another. But also a place for watching the river, a place for sitting, a place for wandering, and in your case, a place which is populated by opportunities for experiencing extreme moments of hubris rather than nostalgia, extreme emotions which connect you to the place. And I think that these bubbly concrete forms, the brackets that hold up the towers, are actually something which I would like, if it were me, I would like to explore more. And what I would also like to do, and we probably can't do it now, but you presumably at this moment have either a Rhino or a SketchUp or a Revit model of the whole thing between the two of you. So you've put it all together. So the actual points of view seem to me to be important. And the one that really struck me as being profoundly interesting is actually, the reason I wanted you to stop on this page is because not the extreme right with the two figures, but the one to the left of that with the square, in the more or less square, where there are figures underneath in the riverbed, the stairs going up, and the stone, marble, concrete, whatever it is, bracket for one of the stupas, and then a glass structure above, and then in the distance, another one. For my money, I would move the camera just a little bit to the left so that I could see and I'd move the eye level down a bit so I can see more of the glass structure, that one with the cursor, your cursor on it. Is that Brian? Yeah. And I'd see a little bit more of that, and then drop the eye level slightly so that and look up a little bit so you see a little bit more of the underside and the other piece as well. And then I would render it in two ways if it were me. One with the riverbed empty, and then one with it full of water. Now, that would put the camera under the water. And then that magic of this would suddenly become clear because you'd be in Atlantis, in an imaginary place under the water, in the foundations of this new, it's not a museum anymore. I mean, it is a museum, but it's a museum of the future, not of the past. And I think that that could be an extraordinary place to be, assuming that by some miracle, the runoffs from the Sierras ends up being clear and that you can see through the water and that it's not contaminated by all of you people and all of the stuff that runs off your backyards and front yards and roads. But that in an imaginary world, you could look through the water. And in fact, in that imaginary world, there may even be fishes and other creatures that come back to live in the river which runs through Los Angeles, because it is now clean, it is now abundant, and it is sustained by very careful management explicitly by structures of the kind that you're making. And
That's a great-
and so I see these things as kind of miraculous towers and then an extraordinary bridge, but where the real magic is revealed when the water returns. And that isn't nostalgic, that's hopeful. But I think you need to dig it. I would dig into the model and also look at ways. I know 4 weeks isn't very long, but I can see there's enough detail in the model. You could do some much higher resolution renders for portfolios and so on in the future. And I would, with Orhan, look very carefully at camera angles. And maybe between the 4 of you, I would say that between the 4 of you, Ariel and Lucy, as well, that you could have a group, if it's a student-driven project, you could have a group session somewhere where you actually look at the way that you set up the scenes and position the cameras in the models. Because I think for Lucy and oh, I've lost you, Ariel, that there are some things to do with camera angles and focal depth that are going to be important for both composite projects in terms of rendering them at once incredibly believable and at the other and at the same time fantastic. And so just to finish from my side, in relation to bubbles, Brian, there's a beautiful book, and Orhan may have got this, called Bubbles, written by a German philosopher called Peter Sloterdijk as part of his Spheres trilogy. It's immensely complicated. He's very entertaining sometimes and hugely pretentious at others. But he did tell a story which I like a lot, which is about what happens. It was a medieval theory about what happens when 2 people kiss. And what happens is that their bubbles coalesce. And the way that they coalesce is the little droplet of blood comes out of their eyes. One person who's in love with the other person, whoever they happen to be, a little droplet of blood jumps out of their eye, which is a sphere. A spherical droplet shoots through the air and enters the other sphere of the other person's eye. And as that happens, the 2 spheres that envelop those people, and this was a medieval idea, that people lived in spheres, the 2 coincide and become one. And I think there's something, I say this because it's about the positive way of thinking about nostalgia and dizziness, which is that there's a lot at stake in the way that societies are organized and the way that our own spheres of influence and spheres of the effect that we produce individually bump up against other people's and occasionally coincide. And for Peter Sloterdijk, his model of society is foam, i.e. a spongy substance made out of lots of bubbles. And that foam is entirely organized by each of us. And I think that's where these bubblicious toroidal stupa-like temple structures are actually incredibly fine, because they could really motivate people to think about that idea. And that their attachment to the bridge as a way of passing from one side to the other, and with those extraordinarily peculiar elliptical mirrors or whatever it is on the roof, that then look down at the water or if you're on the bridge looking up, you see the water reflected. There's a lot to be shown that isn't shown yet. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's already there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now you guys understand why David goes around the world and talk about architecture. It's wonderful. Thank you. And my commentary on this is also based on the image it created, and it's like he cut it out, charted out your whole next engagement with your projects. To don't be stepping back from redefining. Is it nostalgia? Is it giddy now that you have to elevate your projects with the more more appropriate sort of a relationship. But it's interesting that you guys developed these images, these worlds, and now they passed you. They passed your original ideas now, and then you need to go. Your mission is to understand them, what they are. There's a wonderful thing happened between the two. In the beginning, you thought you knew nostalgia, giddy, all, and now that something they generated something, the ideas, and then they become something else from your original departure. And that's a wonderful moment for you to realize as an architect, as a designer, as a storyteller, that now you are also participating with, not only by yourself, but now there's additional things in it that they are also talking to you. So how do you respond to that? Is your like a next step with the projects? To understand and set up this dialogue further. I think it's a wonderful moment if you can see that, and I think David really kind of went there while he was talking about your projects. It's a wonderful sort of a next iteration of your projects. I'm not saying you go back and do this now, but let it digest it a little bit. As the example was that you have the overall model of your drawings now. Let's say you get a better resolution, that's another issue, but now you can really go there. That's where the camera angles and what you call in one image becomes extremely sort of telling in itself, a story. And so I would, if you guys were to work on this anymore, I would just kind of take what you have and start to listen what is there, what you accomplish with these images, and they will make it a better valued project. And now that you can look at the conditions about anything from environmental issues of the river to the city and to the stupas and their meaning and their place in individual experience. I would have liked to go more into the other Gilbert's project. It's a wonderful building, and again, it's the bridge. Let's go back to the drawing after this one and zero in this aerial photograph collage showing the site. That one, yeah. Can you go closer to that? Another thing, by the way, guys, like if you're gonna present things like that, go closer. I mean, this is, there's no excuse. I mentioned it, and it's kind of thrown under the table. It's you spend all this time. Look at this drawing. I mean, it's so much. It's like 2 hours of what you said. It's here in one single image. So I would go back and further sort of understand these things that you put in there, and to talk about bridgeness of it, the stations of life aspect to it, stations of LA River aspect to it. There's all these areas that you can further sort of understand what your images accomplished. That's all I have to say.
It's a beautiful plan. And so
Yeah.
you mustn't, Orhan's absolutely right. You mustn't hide these things away. I mean, this as a drawing, it's the line quality, the blurriness, the pixelation, everything in it, the roughness of the edges, it contributes to the atmosphere of the drawing in a really good way.
I'd just say a couple things. I was thinking a lot about the ground plane, Brian, and trying to think like if there was a way to rappel down through your kaleidoscope pieces, that, if I'm at the bridge level, what happens when I look down? Is there glass on the floor? Are there more layers of bubbles below me that, so that I'm not just focused solely on the sky, but being able to look, up and down in the Z-axis, right? And I think, many of the images that you guys showed show the majority of people on the ground plane, like not the bridge, but the riverbed level. And I don't really know how many people would be there in ratio to the amount of people on the bridge, right? Like, I kind of feel like it's the bridge where I want to be, although I think, maybe there's more of an intervention you could do on the riverbed level and ways to bring people down there. And I think also, since this image is on the screen, your entire structure probably needs to be about 3 times as wide. Because if you look like on Google Maps, you can see that well, to the right is at least that much, maybe twice that distance of industrial. And then going to the left, like if we get over the freeway, we can get to some residential area. But like if you look at it from a practical sense, like how do we even get to here, right? Like we I guess maybe there's a freeway off ramp that might come into that dirt area on the left side. But it seems like it's really just focused on the river, and it's not as focused on trying to connect into a place where people can access, right?
Didn't you have a drawing that's showing that at one time? Either your project or Lucy's project had some connected thing. It's an excellent point, that Scott brought up, and it was discussed. And I'm kind of I don't know if you can, kind of revive some of those like connections that you made earlier on.
I mean, it's set up to connect to the bike path that exists on both sides, at both ends of the bridge that's created.
Yeah, well, that makes some sense. Yeah, you just need to be able to describe that a little better in a picture like this somehow with a different tone or something.
Got it. Yeah, I'm getting the overall idea that the visuals could be, worked a little bit better.
And I know, and it's a similar thing for Gilbert too, which is these lenses that are up in the sky. And, you were talking about different levels of transparency or translucency, and it's kind of blurred and it's kind of not, and you look through different ones and then you get, double. And, I was thinking that, like, unfortunately in LA, it probably 90% of the time, the sky is really quite boring. Or uniform in color, right? Like we don't get the racing clouds moving by like you get in Colorado, Montana, those kinds of places. Especially throughout the summer, it's just plain blue and there's not a whole lot going on. So, I was trying to think, like, can some of these lenses or filters or transparent modulating things, can they happen as vertical walls? Can they happen in the floor of the bridge, so that there's variation instead of just, because if it's blue and it's blurry blue, it's still blue, so try to focus those views onto places where the experience will be activated by different colors, different movement, people walking around.
Great. So this, you guys have any comments yourselves, and anything that, like kind of got your attention to your experience? That's something that, it's a long conversation, but I think you guys got something that you can build upon, both as a strategy from your future projects. This is it's the beginning of the road for you, but also kind of start to understand that you are in a mode that you pour out a lot of stuff, you put it in there, and sometimes, you know, it's very repetitive because, you know, you just like discovered an incredible tool of image making, and you think that every little corner is such important sort of thing, and during that process you really miss the real you know, like chunks of gems, you know. And so I will suggest to everybody that, you know, you go back and start to be more discriminating to the images that you created and see which one carries the ideas and the you know, the weight of the idea more than the other. And then, you know, you just kind of concentrate on few things, few images, and then let's see how you can add value to those, you know. But I understand the, you know, the allure of you know, first time, you know, you can manipulate form, and I'm gonna, each one of them look to you as like incredibly beautiful and all that. It's now that you know the tool, you know that, you know, the possibilities, then I would go back to the objects. I would go back to the stupas. I would further look into, you know, what are those bases mean, you know, what else you can do with those. And, you know, the expectability or knowability of the forms, you know, take it to somewhere a little bit more unknown. And, you know, I hope that you become aware of those elements that you can further sort of understand the objects, you know, that talk to it, you know.
Excellent. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Well,
Well,
thank you very much for inviting me. I have to go and make dinner.
Thank you very much, David. Now that we talk about the river, I'm going to go back to my original proposal to you to drive along the LA River and show you a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great. I shall look
Okay.
forward to that. So
Thank
I'm
you
back
so
in.
much.
I'm back in Venice in on the 7th, 16th, 17th, something like that. And then so we'll see you then.
Okay, thank you.
And
so
good luck,
much.
everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Nice to meet you. Bye for now.
Bye. Wow, you guys got like the world-class feedback here.
It's good.
Yeah, it's that's like, you know, he's imaginative and he just zeroes in into the further imaginative points of your, you know, project. So it's how it happens. I hope you know, you guys kind of digest this projects, you know, further. And there's a lot of material in these drawings that you made, ideas that you developed. Again, that don't be afraid to just like further explore the emotions that you're talking about. Maybe they are just kind of started from there, but they left, and now where they are is a little different, you know, which David mentioned in his starting the last crit.
Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff, you guys. Good to see you're, you know,
Thank you, Scott.
engaged and active to fool around with something like this on your own time. So it's really great to see, and congratulations to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great project for 4 weeks. I mean, this 4 weeks, it's just like, what? Wonderful. Okay, so we'll continue our chat on the group me page that we have with you guys, and then we have more to talk about. But for today, thank you very much. It all paid off, and you really accomplished something. And now you feel more comfortable, perhaps, you know, like getting idea and developing it, you know, and getting to a level that, you know, other people can see what you're doing.
Sir,
Okay.
we'll see you in the group me.
Okay, well, we'll end it up here, and thanks again, and congratulations to you guys. It's really impressive.
Thank you, sir. And thank you,
And
Gilbert.
Maya,
Yeah,
what
thanks
did
Maya
you-
and V.
Maya, what did you think about all this?
I really liked it, and like kind of what they were saying, like the idea that you chose an emotion, but like even though there's like a set definition, everyone interprets it differently, how it feels to themselves and how they choose to present it, which is really cool.
Thank you. How, Valeria, are you here? What do you say?
Yeah, I'm here. I just wanted to say thank you, and more than anything, positive. Yeah,
All right.
it's inspiring, you know. It's like that
Okay.
all of you got together and just nurtured this momentum, and I look forward to seeing what 202 brings forth.
All right. Thank you for coming and seeing this. And it really makes a big difference that, you know, when I see you guys like that, you know, Maya, Valeria, that you care further into what you're studying. And, you know, in the university, when you transfer, these things are going to become more sort of an important, talking to your classmates, talking about the ideas. You will see that your vocabulary and your way of looking at architecture is going to, like, you will almost be able to notice how it's growing, you know, as a little, you know, like a blossom. Okay, have a great weekend. Okay,
Thank you,
and
Professor
See you
Callahan.
later.
we'll see you guys in real next week, I suppose. What do you think, Scott?
Well, we'll see. I don't know.
Did you see my office? I decorated it.
I saw. I've got classes in both worlds, so
Yeah, me too.
I don't know how that's all gonna come together, but it'll be fine and it'll be fun. So
Yeah, okay. See you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Get some
Thank you,
rest.
everybody.
All right.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.